My wife left her email open on our computer. That's how it started. One sentence, buried in a message to her therapist, was all it took to detonate my entire world. The line simply said that my best friend would be joining her at the next session. Again, my best friend, my neighbor, the man I called my brother. In therapy with my wife, my blood turned to ice. My hands started to shake. In that single horrifying instant, I knew the last several years of my life had been a complete and utter lie, and the people I trusted most in the world were about to learn that when you push a man to the absolute brink, you can't be surprised when he pushes back with devastating precision. If you believe that the deepest betrayals deserve an equally clever punishment, then you have found the right channel. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and tap the like icon, because you are about to witness a masterclass in psychological revenge. A story where the cheaters become the architects of their own spectacular downfall. Let's dive in. To understand the depth of the betrayal, you first need to understand what they destroyed. For years, our two families weren't just neighbors. We were a single unit. There was me and my wife, and across the street, there was him. We'll call him Shithead, and his wife Sarah. We had moved into the neighborhood as strangers, but the connection was instant and electric. Our kids were the same age, and they became a little pack, running between our two houses as if they were one giant home. We did everything together. Dinners a few times a week weren't scheduled events. They were just the default. I'd be grilling in the backyard, and I wouldn't even have to text. I'd just look across the street, and Shithead would already be walking over with a six-pack. Sarah trailing behind with a salad. We went on vacations together, renting a big beach house where the four of us would sit on the deck late into the night, long after the kids were asleep, talking about our dreams, our fears, our futures. I saw him as a brother. Truly, I remember one winter our furnace died in the middle of the night. It was 2 a.m. The house was freezing, and I couldn't get a repairman on the phone. I called Shithead. He was at our house in 5 minutes, not with advice, but with tools and a portable heater. We spent the next 3 hours in the crawl space together, freezing and covered in grime, until we got the damn thing working. That's what brothers are for, he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. And my wife and Sarah, they were closer than sisters. They were each other's emergency contact, their confidant, their rock. They shared everything. The triumphs of their kids, the frustrations of work, the quiet insecurities that you only tell your truest friend. We were a fortress of a friendship, a family we had chosen. And that's what makes the next part so gut-wrenching. Because while we were building this beautiful life, 2 of its architects were secretly planning to bulldoze the entire thing. The discovery wasn't a single explosion. It was a series of quiet, sickening clicks, like a bomb counting down. It started with that one word in the email, again. Why would Shithead be going to my wife's therapy sessions? And why was it a secret? My mind was a frantic storm of possibilities, each one darker than the last. With a knot of dread tightening in my stomach, I searched her email archives, and there it was. A trail of breadcrumbs going back 6 weeks. Emails to and from the therapist, scheduling, confirming, proof. It wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. A cold, professional calm washed over me. The kind of calm you get when you're in shock. I logged into our mobile phone account. My heart hammered against my ribs as the page loaded, and then I saw it. The call logs. The text records. From the late summer, it had started as a trickle, then a stream. By the holidays, it was a tidal wave. Hundreds of texts. Every single day. On some days, it peaked at nearly 500 messages exchanged between them. 500. And then the most sickening realization of all hit me. I scrolled to the dates for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Both holidays, we had hosted a huge dinner. Our parents, our siblings, our kids, our entire families were gathered in our home, celebrating together. And Shithead and Sarah had been there with us. And the records showed, clear as day, that the entire time, while passing the turkey, while watching the kids open presents, while sitting right across the room from me and Sarah, my wife and my best friend were texting each other. Constantly. It wasn't just an affair. It was a performance. A secret world they built right in front of our eyes, a digital fantasy happening in plain sight, mocking us with every silent vibration of their phones in their pockets. They weren't just cheating on us, they were laughing at us. I printed everything. The emails, the text logs, with the dates and times highlighted in yellow, I laid them out on the kitchen table like evidence in a murder trial. Because that's what it felt like. A murder. The murder of our marriage, our friendship, our family. When she came home, I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I just pointed to the table. Explain this. She crumpled. The denial was brief and pathetic, but it was there. Then came the tears. And then, the confession. Yes, she admitted, her voice trembling. We fell in love. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I stumbled to the couch and just collapsed, face down, burying my head in a cushion, unable to even look at her. Her voice continued from somewhere above me, a surreal and distant sound. It just happened. I don't know how. We went on that school district trip together. Something happened in my hotel room. And it just moved so fast. She said it with a kind of bewildered innocence, as if she were a passive victim of a runaway train, not the person who laid the tracks and bought the ticket. But I love him, she said, the words hitting me like physical blows. And I don't feel anything for you anymore. I'm sorry. Sorry. The word was so small, so completely inadequate for the Grand Canyon of devastation she had just opened up in my life. She went on to explain, as I lay there suffocating in the ruins of my marriage, that they had a plan. They were going to divorce me and Sarah. They weren't going to move in together right away, because of the kids. But eventually they would. And those therapy sessions, oh, they weren't for working through their guilt. No, of course not. They were for the noble purpose of figuring out how to break this to me and Sarah, as gently as possible. They were so very concerned for our well-being. You see, the audacity of it was breathtaking. The condescending, self-serving piety. They weren't worried about us. They were crafting a PR strategy for their own selfishness. Sarah and I are both certain they were never going to tell us about the affair at all. They would have quietly divorced us for some trumped-up reason, waited a respectable amount of time, and then discovered their feelings for one another down the line, hoping everyone would just shrug and say, well, isn't that nice for them? They saw us as obstacles, as props in their little romance novel. For the next 2 months, I lived in a fog. My wife moved out. I cried every single day. I cried at my desk at work. I cried in my car. I cried making this story. The pain was a physical weight, a constant pressure on my chest. The worry for my kids was an incessant, high-pitched scream in the back of my mind. How would this rupture their world? How would they ever understand this? But through the grief, another feeling began to smolder. A cold, hard, diamond-sharp anger. I am not a shrinking violet. I am not a man who rolls over when he has been wronged. And in this case, I was, objectively, very, very wronged. My grief wasn't going away, but it was about to get some company, revenge. My thoughts turned to Shithead, and his one all-consuming passion, the Board of Education. A couple of years ago, he'd run for a seat on the school board. He was a massive underdog, a nobody going up against established local figures. But he was hungry for it. And I, like a good brother, had poured myself into his campaign. I helped him craft his campaign materials. I coached him for his debates, running mock sessions in his living room until 2 a.m. My wife, a well-known and respected employee in that very same school district, used her network to get the word out, and against all odds, he won. By a handful of votes, a real squeaker. Being on the board became his entire identity. He wasn't just a member, he was the board member. He joined every committee. He attended every ribbon cutting, every school play, every fundraiser. It was the foundation of his social standing in our town, and ironically, it became the foundation of his affair. The late-night meetings and weekend school events were the perfect cover for him and my wife to spend time together. As I sat there, stewing in my misery, A thought sparked in the darkness. An extramarital affair between a sitting member of the Board of Education and a prominent employee of the school district he governed. Politically, that was messy. At best, at worst, it was a violation of district policy. It was a bomb, waiting to go off. And there was a second, even more volatile bomb, right next to it. My wife was on the verge of a major career triumph. She had just finished her master's degree in school administration. Why? Because her principal and the district superintendent, a longtime friend to all four of us, ironically, had personally urged her to do it. They had a specific administrative position opening up, and they were grooming her for it. It was a done deal. Everyone in the district knew my wife was getting that job and the massive pay raise that came with it. It was her dream. So here they were. Shithead, the proud public servant, and my wife, the soon-to-be promoted school administrator. Both of their futures were tied to the sterling reputation of the school district, a reputation that a nasty public scandal could tarnish in an instant. I had all the ammunition I needed. The text from both of them admitting the affair. The phone records, the emails. I could have just carpet-bombed the superintendent and the entire board with the evidence. But I knew that wouldn't be as effective. Coming from me, the grieving, betrayed husband, it might look like sour grapes. It could be dismissed as a messy domestic dispute. I might not be seen as a credible, objective source. No, I couldn't be the one holding the match. But I could make them believe someone else was. That's when the idea came to me. It was simple. It was elegant. It was diabolical. I invented a person. A fictitious, furious friend of mine and Sarah's. A phantom of righteous anger. I went to my wife. My voice was grave, concerned. I told her that I'd confided in a friend about the situation, and this friend was incandescent with rage. They felt that what she and Shithead had done was a grotesque abuse of power and trust. I told her this friend was threatening to show up at the next public Board of Education meeting and expose the entire affair during the public comment section, to shame them in front of the entire town. I tried to talk them down, I said, looking her right in the eye. But they are furious. They feel you both need to be held accountable. I can't guarantee they won't do it. I planted the seed of terror, and then I walked away and let it grow. As I fully expected, my wife ran straight to Shithead, in a panic. And his reaction was exactly what I had predicted. For a man obsessed with his public image, the idea of being publicly humiliated, of being called out in a packed room, was his worst nightmare. He couldn't risk it. He couldn't call the bluff, because what if it wasn't a bluff? His guilt and paranoia did all the work for me. He concluded that his only option was to get ahead of the story, to control the narrative. He decided he had to preemptively confess the affair to the board president and the superintendent. A few days later, my wife told me that Shit had done it. He'd gone to the superintendent and laid it all bare. The superintendent, the man who considered us all his friends, was apparently horrified and deeply disappointed. He immediately recommended that to avoid a public scandal that would damage the district, Shithead should resign from the Board of Education. Immediately. And just like that, he did. He resigned. Sarah told me later that he was utterly, completely crushed. The thing that had become the very center of his world, the source of all his pride and status, was gone, wiped out in a single, humiliating confession that he himself had initiated. She said he barely got out of bed for 3 days. He was a ghost in his own house, haunted by the public identity he had just been forced to kill. Part 1 was complete. Now for Part 2. Once word of Shithead's sudden resignation started to leak, the gears of consequence began to turn for my wife. The superintendent, the same man who had urged her to get her master's degree, called her into his office. He was apparently tearful. He told her how sorry he was, but with Shithead's resignation now linked to an affair with a district employee, it was no longer politically appropriate for her to be promoted into a leadership position. The optics were just too terrible. The dream job, the one that had been guaranteed, the one she had spent 2 years and thousands of dollars preparing for, was gone. The position was quietly filled by an outside candidate, This sent a shockwave of confusion and rumors through the district's staff. Everyone had known that job was hers. What happened? Nobody knew the full story, but they knew enough to whisper. The absolute peak of this poetic justice came about a week later. It was our son's birthday. Despite everything, we agreed to take him out for a birthday breakfast together, to maintain some semblance of normalcy for him. We were sitting there in a booth at a popular local diner. My wife was trying to force a smile, a hollow, brittle thing. Suddenly, another parent from our son's school stopped by our table. She was beaming. "Oh my gosh, congratulations," she said to my wife. "I heard the news about your new position. That is so amazing. You're going to be fantastic." I watched my wife's face. The color drained from it. The forced smile froze, then cracked. She managed to choke out a "thanks," and then, mumbling an excuse, she slid out of the booth and practically ran to the bathroom. I knew she was in there, locked in a stall, crying for the future she had just been congratulated for, a future that had been stolen from her, a future she had thrown away for a man who was, at that very moment, probably still in bed, mourning the death of his own ego. I let the dust settle for a couple of weeks. Then, right before she officially moved out of the house for good, I delivered the final, quiet little twist of the knife. We were talking about the logistics of the split, and I just let it drop, casual. "You know," I said, "it's funny, I was never able to get in touch with that furious friend of mine again. It's almost like they never existed in the first place." I watched her process that. The confusion, the dawning horror, the final soul-crushing realization. There was no furious friend. There was no threat of public exposure. There was only me. They had panicked. They had confessed. They had detonated their own careers, all because of a ghost I had created in their guilty, paranoid minds. They weren't outmaneuvered by an angry mob. They were surgically dismantled by the very man they had disrespected, underestimated, and discarded. The fallout has been comprehensive. Our town is fairly small. Shithead grew up here. My wife has worked here for nearly 20 years. Word gets around. My wife refuses to talk to me about work, but I hear things from friends still in the district. Her formerly spotless reputation is in tatters. She's no longer the golden child. She's the subject of gossip and pity. And Shithead, the formerly gregarious, life-of-the-party social butterfly of our neighborhood, is a recluse. He's completely gone underground. He barely emerges from his house to mow his lawn. He's a pariah in the town that was once his kingdom. He's moving out soon, not to a new life with my wife, but to a shitty little townhouse across town. The only thing he can afford now that he's facing a future of crushing child support payments to Sarah. They claim they're still going to try and make a go of it. My wife and him. Despite the public humiliation, the lost careers, the financial ruin, I truly, honestly wish them luck with that. I'm sure it will be a lot of fun for them to finally show their faces together in this town. Carrying all that baggage, the pain of their betrayal hasn't vanished. I still have hard days, but I no longer feel powerless. They use their positions of trust as a friend, a husband, a board member to conduct their affair in the shadows. All I did was shine a light and let their own actions and their own guilt do the rest. Justice, it turns out, is sometimes just a matter of giving people a little push in the direction they were already headed. So, what do you think? Was this revenge a perfectly calculated masterpiece of psychological warfare? Or did it go too far? I want to know your take on it, so drop your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you love hearing stories where the masterminds of betrayal get a heaping dose of karmic justice, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.